Hey, hello again. It's been a couple months. I am alive and well. Took a break for the holidays. But yeah, what's up, Moyne? Good to see you back. First one in. But yeah, today we have a fun guest, someone I've been fortunate enough to work with on some cool stuff between all the way from like automotive stuff all the way into like some film stuff and some game stuff. So it's been a wide variety of things we've worked at the studio. He is an art director at Perception. But yeah, that's all the introing I'll do. We can switch it over to hey Seiji, you are now live on Twitch for the first time, I think.
Yeah, first time.
Yeah.
First
So
time, long time. No, not really long time.
yeah,
Thanks for
so
having me.
yeah, super fun. This is part like one of like the next two streams because we're gonna get David on here, and then we're gonna get you and David and Vlad to all go over kind of a share and tell of a short film you did last year. It would be last year or 2 years ago at this point.
I
I
think it
think
was
it's two.
last year.
Yeah, like early last year. I don't
Yeah,
know. You've
we
been
had
teasing
started
it for a
working.
bit.
Yeah, we had started working on it. I guess during the original
The
pandemic.
original, the first year
That
of
was
the
too late.
yeah, when we
Um,
were actually taking it seriously and staying inside, and now we're just bombarded to just trudge on,
and then we like released it. I think in like March or so.
which was
So I think
awesome.
it was like, yeah, maybe like half a year of like putting it together.
Yeah, and it
Year and a half.
was like a mix of you doing Houdini, Vlad doing obviously just Vlad UI stuff, making things look complex and cool, and then David or both of you did some Unreal, all of it in Unreal, right?
Yeah, so Dave did like he was the mech guy basically.
Ah,
And then after he got that kind of wrapped up, he pitched it on the Unreal stuff as well. So
cool.
like while he was kind of designing the hero assets,
Mm,
I was kind of getting the environments together and then
yeah,
all the Houdini stuff to kind of complement those environments.
sweet. Yeah, that was who. That would be Unreal 4, not 5, which is beta right now. So that's like doing the hard work, not GI based unlimited texel
Yeah,
density stuff.
it's funny because the lighting actually, I mean, it works pretty well.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Surprisingly, without GI.
Did
And
you
then
guys look at a
there's,
lot of the Quixel stuff? I mean, it's very dark, similar vibes to that really old like Quixel thing that was like that Blade Runner car thing, like the overcast. Like you can get away with a lot of just like I was just always confused about. Oh, Seiji's volume is low, huh? Let
let me
me.
check here.
Oh,
Let
it's
me
on
check
my.
my. Oh,
It's on
sorry.
my
Go ahead.
side. I think so. Is that better?
Hello, hello.
That should be better. I had my headphones down because I have.
Mm.
I'll change it here actually. Okay, yeah, I have just a cluster of different volume knobs everywhere. Oh, I should also change my other one.
I'm gonna check my Zoom audio just in case though, because sometimes it swaps it to the wrong like input.
No, it's on my end
Yeah. All
because
right.
it
Cool.
pulls it from my desktop and then ports it into the stream. So yeah, it's on my end. Because you sound fine in my headphones, and that's what it's picking up. So it should be good, Moyne. Thanks for calling that out. Would have been horrible to have a really quiet stream the whole time. So that should I think my volume says that it's higher now. But yeah, we can
You
kind of
got
just
like a
get
you got a dual camera setup? Is that what's going on here?
well, yeah. So stream gets DSLR, you get crappy like overhead one because the stream won't share. Like it's can only go to one. So like for you to see me on Zoom, I bought that like at the beginning of the pandemic before I bought a DSLR, and so that was like and now it's just an alternate camera that just sits
Mhm.
there and watches me as I work. And you can now see I think we have my dog bed and all the stuff that's not on stream.
Yep.
Um, I also updated my background. This is new to this year, a bunch of stuff. Harry Potter wands, Harry Potter stuff. My Boba Fett that me and my wife built at Build a Bear. They have like a really cool Star
Oh,
Wars
cool.
setup. And I think that's it. Everything else is pretty much Van Gogh. Watching everybody. But yeah, we can just get into the intro of Seiji. I mean, you have a really interesting kind of trek that no one else really on stream has had from kind of your beginnings. So we could start at like, when did it start, like art wise? Like, I know like your college is a little bit different, but like, when did you really be like, I should go to school and do this as a job?
Mm. It's actually pretty funny. When I was picking up like digital art and things like that, it was, I guess back in the day, it might have been considered a little early. It was like in like middle school or
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
And I went to like public school where, I feel like it was pretty rare that like your art teacher knew how to do Photoshop back
Oh,
then.
okay. Yeah.
Um, but that really kind of like kick-started everything. And then even in high school, I was pretty fortunate to have like it was called commercial art classes
Mm.
where you can like pick like an elective, and
Oh,
that was
okay.
all
Yeah.
kind of like advertisement based like artwork.
Right.
And that was like one of my favorite classes in school. So, you know, when it came time to like trying to apply to colleges and stuff, that was partially what I was like really into and really was looking into like applying for. Um, but one thing being another, a lot of like acquaintances and like family, friends, and whoever wanted to share their opinion, be like, yeah, you don't want to do graphic design.
Right.
You're gonna be burned out by like 30, and they're
Yeah.
not wrong, but
Right.
at the
But
same
like,
time, if you like it, that's kind of, you got to do it.
it's also my friends
You
who
know?
are like accountants now. It's like, is there a difference? Like, it seems like
Yeah.
just working anywhere is you're gonna be burnt out by 30. Like, that is what happens. That's why people have kids and have
Yeah.
hobbies, I guess, to avoid that.
Yeah. So like, it's funny because I got kind of steered away from it for a while. And they're just like, yeah, you're creative, but you're also like good at math and things like that. So like, maybe you should look into something like architecture.
Mm,
And, I was like, nah,
makes sense. Yeah,
that
it's a good in between.
sounds good. Sounds professional. Sounds like I
Yeah,
could
a
like.
draftsman is a cool title to have, that cool desk. I think, what is
Hmm.
it? It's Sleepless in Seattle. Tom Hanks has that like really
Oh
cool
yeah.
office and like the big table like they used to.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's funny because even like when I started in school, they were still doing hand drafting.
Yeah.
Even though they really should have been pushing the whole digital side of things because
Right.
that's
Yeah. Because does
where it's all
architectural
going.
viz like, is that an offshoot or is that a whole separate like, different places do architectural viz and different places do the like drafting of it?
Um, it depends. It
Mm,
really depends. So yeah, like professionally speaking, so certain like architectural offices will do their own like in-house renderings.
mm-hmm.
At this point, basically every firm does that
Okay.
to a
Yeah.
certain degree, but um, when you like really want something good, you outsource that to another company. And that really kind of depends on the studio that's working on it and their client, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess the good thing about working at a visualization studio is that you tend to work with more interesting clients, whereas if you're like in an architecture firm doing in-house renderings, uh, you know they might not prioritize that as much
Right.
in terms of the importance of their chain of command and whatnot. Um, so yeah, like I was working at a visualization firm, and we got to work with a lot of interesting and pretty kind of world famous clients, which is pretty awesome.
Is it pretty global or does it kind of depend on where your firm's based or?
Um, I think it was fairly global for us. Yeah, because we've worked with all sorts of offices from European ones, A lot of New York based ones, obviously, but also
Hmm.
we've also worked with like Japanese architects as well,
That's cool.
um, doing
Does
all
that mean you
sorts of
kind of have to
stuff.
have like the knowledge of all the legal kind of things all around? No,
No,
you just do it, and they're
at the
like,
end of the
yeah,
day, it's just it's image making.
okay. And then they
Yeah.
like if it doesn't work, then it's like, oh well, it would have been cool, but
Hmm.
we don't really care.
Yeah, but like I guess back to like kind of the development side of things. You know, I went to architecture school. The first couple of years, I mean, I enjoyed the whole process, but I think a couple of years into it, I had kind of discovered that you can, you know, make renderings of these
Yeah,
things, and I was
you don't
just
have
like
to make
hooked.
buildings. You can make like literally anything.
Hmm. And I was just hooked on that. And so that was kind of my gateway into just like 3D in general. Um, and yeah, it's really just kind of been like building up skill set since then.
Do you think it gave you a little bit more of like an organized kind of pipeline of like drawing, then like 2D to 3D to like render, like versus people that kind of just jump in at like, oh, that looks 3D, I'll make that, or like I'll follow this tutorial and make that. Like you had sort of like more based in reality things and then moved on to like, oh cool, I can expand into fantasy versus like people that start in fantasy and then like try to
Mm.
inch towards realism at the end.
Yeah, that's funny. I never really thought about it. Um, but I suppose that makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, just because like, um, you know, especially like when you start working in architectural visualization, um, realism is pretty much at the top of the priority list,
Yeah.
um, followed by making a kind of a beautiful composition and image
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Because a lot of times, you know, like at the end of the day, your clients like want that beautiful image
Mm-hmm.
because it gets, you know, seen by everyone and everyone's like,
Probably
oh,
gets
that's so
money,
great.
yeah, and everyone's like,
Um,
can,
but in the like process of getting there, they always lose the forest for the trees,
oh, okay, yeah.
you know? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, but can we just like see a little bit more of that light fixture or something? It's just
Yeah.
like,
Does it
yeah, it just,
matter?
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Does it matter? Um, but I guess in terms of like the organization thing about it, yeah, I suppose, you know, definitely like getting like a, even like the education and architecture, um, that kind of structure of it,
Yeah.
I see it kind of paying off. Um,
Right.
and
I think
also
it would
just,
also kind of be like, I think people constantly run into stuff of like just real world size and like things that just
mhm.
wouldn't work, or like you know that a door is probably like 8 feet tall and a room is probably 10 feet tall. Like that
six
changes.
6'8" actually.
Or 6 foot, like I don't even know it. I'm constantly googling stuff to like make sure that it, like, because it just looks wrong and just like I don't know. Oh, the door handle's like a foot higher than it should be, and it feels wrong because you see that stuff all the time, and then when it's wrong you're like, I don't like it, and I don't know why I don't like it. And
Hmm.
then like you were kind of working in like you're working on blueprints or like drafts, and you just like, yeah, well this is like, it will fall, like this will crumble if it's not right in some way, which kind of forces you to be like just muscle memory, or just like, yeah, you know how tall a door is, like
Right.
that's like worth a lot, like in a lot of things that we're doing in like realism, less so in
Hmm.
fantasy because you know, but still a lot of that's based, like
Yeah,
all
but
of that's
like even
based.
in fantasy, like you're still centered around
Right.
usually a human subject,
Yeah.
and those human subjects are still kind of have to obey the laws of
Yeah,
physics and all that
something,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. And so, like for us to sort of believe in, you know, what we're seeing,
Hmm.
you know, you have to have that kind of like logic built
Yeah.
into the world.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so yeah, it
interesting.
makes a lot of sense, and I guess it's something I do kind of take for granted in a sense. Um,
So what was the
yeah.
jump from being like, this is fun, I like this, I learned a lot about this, to like, why don't I just go try to do like, what is even the step? I feel like that's really hard for people to imagine, like having a career you like and know a lot about and went to school for, and then just being like, why not a different career option and then just going and being very successful in that, right, too, of just like, yeah, that worked. Like it's easier once you're kind of in it, and like people are like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it worked for him. But like I think a lot of people, like graphic designers, thinking to go like do like animation at like a commercial studio would be like, no, I'm not gonna make that jump.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to kind of, what I was passionate about before even starting in architecture. And it's funny, just like, I think just kind of that path I took just kind of kept inching back towards what I was really kind of interested in and really wanted to kind of pursue. Um, I've always like, even in like design school, I always like enjoyed trying to figure out like what, the story of the project was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I felt like I don't know, I'm just drawn to kind of that kind of attaching poetic meaning to things.
Right.
And that was kind of, there are certain jobs in visualization that allow for that, but it's far more the exception to the rule, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, it just, yeah, I was just gravitated towards, what I do now more than what I was doing. Um, and it was funny because I was always, trying to kind of head in that direction in the context of like the visualization studio I was working in.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you know, the studio itself was very open to it, and they were very kind of like, uh, I think we had similar goals. It's just like they just weren't coming to fruition. And so I felt like after,
Yeah.
I mean, I spent 7 years there, I think.
Oh wow, I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah. So I was doing that for quite some time, and it was rewarding for a pretty long time. But it just wasn't like happening, and I just felt like I needed to make a shift to something that felt a little bit more directly in line with what my goals were.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. Yeah, you
yeah.
can't like bend. Like I had a little bit of that. Like I was at an ad agency and I was consistently wishing I did like other work. And it's like at the end of
Hmm.
the day, I mean that's like I went to like go work with you guys at Perception. I was like at the end of the day, I want to work on main titles, and it's not on an ad agency to get
Yeah.
that work. It's just like that's
Exactly.
not like their goal. Like that's not where they make money, and that's like not what they're known for. So I have to move. I can't just like forever be begrudgingly like, oh, I wish I could work on it, but the place I work doesn't do it, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of, it took me a long time to get to that conclusion. Um, but I suppose I made it, and I
Yeah,
actually had it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it was also a long transition period too. Because it was funny, I had, you know, the other part of sort of the visualization work that I was doing, at least in the studio I was at, it was called Brooklyn Digital Foundry. Um, they had this. I mean, we would always get approached for like animation more than still images.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of that was like, these architects like to like break down their sort of building into like this like diagram and like explain like,
Hmm.
how the people are flowing through this, how the different like pieces of the building are kind of working together.
Is it some of those
uh
like light cycles of like look at it like throughout like nighttime with all the lights outside and like daytime and stuff, or no, not as
some
much?
of that, but it's more like saying like, we arranged, let's say it's like for some kind of like cultural center or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we arranged, the auditorium and the conference rooms and whatnot in like this certain kind of arrangement to like accommodate the better kind of flow between, whatever. um so it was like trying to communicate ideas like that in like animated diagrams. So it was like
Hmm.
these kind of simple shapes, very colorful, kind of motion graphics based stuff. And that kind of just led me down the road to like looking at, people like Ash Thorpe. And, he had just kind of put out the Learn Squared courses back in like,
Oh right, yeah, you mentioned that.
whenever that was, like 2016, 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, when he
It's
was
a
like a
while
founder
ago.
of it, yeah, and still
Yeah.
involved.
And so I jumped on that. I was like, I asked my company, I was like, hey, can I take this class? It's during the
Mm-hmm.
day, but I really think it's important. And they're like, yeah, of course. So like, that was just kind of the beginning of the transition. Really, is just like picking up things from that, and I took his main titles course, and then just
Mm.
kept working on like other small personal projects that were never completed, kind of thing.
Like
But like I would be
everything,
able
yeah.
to, yeah, I could grab like a shot or two and like put it in my reel or something like that, and you know, pieced it together.
Was
That's
Perception your first studio that like took you on, or did you have like stuff before that that you bounced around to?
no, it was it.
Nice.
I interviewed around a couple of places, but I guess I think a lot of places didn't want to take the risk
Mm.
in a
Yeah,
sense,
it's kind
because
of
my
hard. Yeah.
portfolio wasn't like 100% what they do,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So it's tough to make that initial jump, and I guess I got a little bit lucky.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think it with Perception does have like a good way of like the leadership there being able to see beyond like, yeah, it's not there, but like with some coaxing, we'll get you in the kind of cycle. You'll see other people doing it. Like I think that's a lot of it. Like I
mhm.
mean, you and I started somewhat similar. Like I started early 2019, like January, and you were a little bit before that, I think.
Yeah, I think it was September.
Yeah, and so like we're still like somewhat similar to like newly working with that workflow.
Hmm.
And it was just like just seeing each other work on stuff. It's like, oh, you're going about it that way. I'll go about it this way. And it's like, oh, like a lot of times we just sat and chatted about like what we should do about it because we were both kind of stuck.
Hmm.
And then like just through like a 20-minute conversation, which I miss a lot about in studio stuff of like you just be like, oh yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. Why would we not do it that way? Kind of thing, which is like
Yeah.
on your own, you're just kind of in a silo of like, I don't know, whatever I can find as inspiration, I'll do stuff like that. And I won't
Mm.
really go beyond that because why would I do rounds with myself? Like, you go off your first idea pretty much, and then you just like, unless there's someone else to bounce off, you just go with that kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, the review cycles are a lot spaced out, I guess, when you're remote. So
Yeah.
I
It's
kind of
also,
like
yeah.
it
Yeah. It is nice to be over
because it gives you
Zoom.
time to like develop it a bit more.
Yeah. And just think about it. And then, like, also mute yourself and just sit there. Whereas, like, I don't know. It took me a bit in college getting used to critique rounds where you're just like, don't hurt my feelings. But you're like, it's not you. It's like, what's we need about it. We need to get it to like great
Right.
versus like, yeah, it works. Like, it's like, yeah, no,
Exactly.
let's do it a couple more times and then we'll be at a good thing. And it's like, okay, back to it of exhausting my brain of ideas and
Yeah.
then picking like the three best out of 20 that it was like blood sweat and tears to get out of like racking your brain over and over. I mean, we worked on one that didn't go anywhere, but it was like, boy, at the end of it you're just like, I don't know any other combos of what I could do to to answer this problem. And it's like, okay, cool, we'll take two of them. And you're like, oh, finally, like we're done with this process and we can move on to like working on it and like developing it further. Like I always think that's fun, but also like the worst because like that's when you're up at night and you're like, oh, I could do that. Yeah, that actually makes sense. Or you're in the shower. Whereas like after that, it's just like chug through the pipeline, like get it done now. It's like the pitching phase kind of is like the most stressful and most rewarding, which I don't think is in
Yeah.
many other fields, like
Yeah.
pitching kind of stuff.
That's true. I actually really enjoy the pitching process as
Yeah,
well.
it's
Um,
it's a
it
short
is
window and
stressful AF,
stressful.
but
Yeah,
I tend to like it more than production.
yeah, because production, I don't know. In pitching, you're like, who knows who's gonna figure this out? And then in production, you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm gonna figure it out. Whoopsies! Like wow, I shouldn't have photoshopped a bunch of this stuff that's way too complex to make
Yeah,
and took like 2 seconds to plop
for
in there.
sure.
I've
Yeah,
always
I
been on
mean
the other end
it's
of like in the production where you're like, who made this? And it's like, oh, some Photoshop, and you're like, of course it is, because holy crap, we can't. This is so many photos collaged together and not renders, and now we have to render it, and that's a
hmm.
lot of work beyond just like copy and pasting an image into a single artboard.
Yeah, and I feel like for me. I try, at least for how do I want to put this? I think like a couple of years ago, this idea in my head kind of popped in, and maybe it was like kind of out in the zeitgeist or whatever. But I had like felt like I just, well, I guess working in visualization, at least in my studio, is very much like a 3D generalist role,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I think was probably pretty much the ideal way for me to kind of develop, myself as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of those beginning years and even now. Um, and so a couple of years into that process, I was like, I really need to like lean into that and just like this idea of like becoming like a complete generalist kind of popped into
Right.
my head where um that means like literally everything like simulation.
Yeah.
um
Or just knowledge base. I don't know. There's a certain point in it I notice where it's like once I really forced myself to like in that generalist like go into Houdini, I was like, it all is just the same. Like just show me the names. Like hopping in Blender, you're just like, yeah, just show me where the vertex
mhm.
is and the move tool and the all of the basic things, and you're like, yeah, it just converts everywhere. And that's I think the joy of a generalist. You're not like beholden because you are constantly like getting the bigger picture to hopefully be able to like squeeze a little thing out of that one area
Mhm.
and like just move on, or like be able to talk to anybody like when a specialist comes in and be like, yeah, like that will work, like I need you to do that and I need to sit over here and do this thing and just solve a lot of the gaps in the big overall thing that other people can
Right.
deal with.
Yeah, it's that like perspective of knowing like that complete pipeline, I think is really key. Especially when you're like pitching frames too. Because yeah, you do kind of need to have that idea in the back of your head of like, how is this gonna come together afterwards?
Yeah, I was stuck by that a long time where I was like, I'm not gonna fake it. Like if I'm gonna end up doing this, so I'm gonna at least figure out a little bit of how to do it. But like when you have a week, you don't have R&D time to like figure
Mm-hmm.
out that effect right now that you want to use later. It's like just draw it, just draw it on like the frame if you want like some squiggly little lines. Don't do a simulation that's gonna like take up
Mm-hmm.
forever. Like working with Johnny, which we both worked with, who's the I think CCD or EC. He's just a big creative director there.
He's the
He's
big boy.
constantly, yeah, just like, hey, don't invest in there. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
stop. Just stop. Stop and move on to something else. We don't have time. You're like, okay, I would love to go another 2 weeks on this, but yeah, I will stop fixing this rock simulation and move on to actually getting a frame out because we need like more frames. And
Yeah.
like that's like the over deliver under promise thing is like very hard to get used to, of like just fudge it and then we'll figure it out when we win it. Like stop. Like we're not going to win it if we don't have frames. Please just give us some frames and we'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, or you'll figure it out at the end of the
Yeah.
day, really.
Yep. It's very much like a fine balance of knowing that. Um,
It's
uh,
a learned skill, I think, because
yeah,
I didn't have it. Yeah.
I really think I've learned that a lot since starting at Perception,
Yeah.
actually. Um, Especially because they have really tight deadlines.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of the film industry of like hurry up, wait, and then just like go. Like you're kind of
Hmm.
sitting there waiting for notes because you can't do anything without notes, and then it's like now go, and you're like okay. Like I just have to be
Yeah.
like, I always end a gig and I'm like, there's no way I can get a mindset like after like 2 weeks of that. I'm like, there's no way my mind can get back into like that groove, and then like first day you're like, yeah, okay, it's just like shifting gears into like I have to be like like it feels like practicing for a game and like a sporting event and then doing it and you're like, wow, in
Mm.
retrospect I can't believe that that happened and like that finished and I'm still alive and I did it and I did better than I thought. And then during it you're like, it's just spinning plates and you're just like, I don't know, it's gonna end at some point. It has to go out. I think that's what, I really like about it. It's like it has to go out unless it just dies, like, which is very rare. It has to happen, and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, it can't just go on forever. In a lot of cases, some cases it can, and it's just perpetual. But like A lot of times it's
Yeah,
gonna end.
it
Yeah.
really depends on the client.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but most of the time it, it goes out, and then my first thing of it, you've had like quite a few under your belt of like sitting and watching it big screen, and like you're like, no, it's my name, kind of worth
Yeah.
it. And you're just like,
I
nice.
haven't actually seen a single movie yet, like
You
on
didn't go to
big
the theaters
screen.
for any of them?
No.
Oh, I went to the Alamo because it's pretty COVID safe. They have like
Yeah.
filters and all these rules, and I felt safe, and I was like, I gotta go see it. Like, worked for so long on it, I have to go and like look at it for the first time. But you had a lot of Disney Plus things. There's no way to see
Yeah,
that
yeah,
in the theater,
I've seen the Disney Plus stuff.
which is just
Um, and
ours is
I've watched like Shang-Chi on Disney Plus or something. But
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
just still haven't gone to the theater for any of my credits.
yeah. Which ones? It's a lot of them at this point, right? Like you've been in
It's a
like
handful. Not really, actually. I think I have credits on
Black
Falcon and the
Widow.
Winter Soldier. Black Widow I got credited on, but like I barely did
Same,
anything
dude.
on
I
there.
was on it for, I kid you not, 3 days, like, in between.
Yeah, I
Like,
think I was like
yeah.
half a week or
Oh yeah,
something.
we had the same break, and they're like, okay, cool, get this single VFX shot and do like a little bit for the title, and you're like, okay. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's like I think 0.3 seconds of the movie, and you get a credit. It's like, okay, that didn't feel real. And then Shang-Chi, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like that feels real. I feel earned to have my
Yeah.
name up there.
Yeah, so I have those three basically. It's Falcon, uh, Black Widow, and Shang-Chi right now.
You weren't on any of WandaVision? I thought you were a bit of that.
I wasn't
Oh,
actually,
because that was in
because I was
tandem
on
with some
Falcon.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
with that.
Falcon doing all of its stuff, which was in tandem. You Loki? You were Loki, I thought.
I did a bit of like pitching on it,
Right.
but I didn't do anything that was like in the show.
Oh yeah, we were pitching
So I
both
didn't get
for
credited.
Falcon, which
Hmm.
yeah, you ended up doing some of the actual thing, and I did a whole different route. That's the other thing about pitching. You're like, oh wow, that's what ended up, because you're on the pitch team, and then like they just like go off, and you're like, huh, that's what won out. Weird. I did not see that coming. But
Yeah,
that's
Falcon
like
was weird because they like pivoted on
right, yeah,
creative.
midway through, which is not that uncommon,
Hmm.
where it just is not working. So then, at the end of the day, they get to what they want, and they pay enough to do that. So is what it is. And
Yeah.
then we worked on some GM stuff, which was, I think, a pretty good stretch of when we were both in office, which was pretty
Hmm.
fun. Of just like that kind of also felt like a personal project where it was like pretty open ended, not that crazy of deadlines because it was like 2-3 years out from the thing happening
Yeah.
that we were like working on it, and it was just like making cool intro animations, and that was really fun because we were both like, you were doing a lot of the like, I mean, we also had Ron, which was super fun because that was
Yeah.
like the secret sauce of like, could we get this? He's like, oh, absolutely. And like 20 minutes later,
Yeah.
it'd come
Yeah.
back, and
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, Houdini guy who knows what he's doing. Whereas I'm
Yeah.
like fumbling through YouTubing while I'm like doing stuff and like hoping it turns out and I can get it to somebody. But yeah, that was super fun as like a trifecta of just like lots of ideas running in tandem and just handing stuff back
Hmm.
and forth, and it's pretty much what came out to be the end thing. Like what we finished pretty soon, other than like a couple changes at the end, was like what the thing was, and just like, oh yeah, we just kind of did that in like a couple weeks,
Yeah.
moved on to some
That
other
was actually a
stuff.
fun one. I forget about that
Yeah,
sometimes.
because it was years later that like
Yeah.
I was pulling that up, and I was like, we finished this in 2019, we're looking at it in 2020, like in the like late fall, and it was
Hmm.
going out. It was just like, huh, that's, I mean, that's like the difference of like film stuff pretty much doesn't do that. It's like within like 3 to 2 months, and like
Yeah.
automotive is like, oh yeah, let's dig that up and go back to that route that was like way 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 long ago, and you're like, what, I don't even remember this file, and then you open it and you're like, ah, I'm an idiot. Like, what was I doing? This is pretty messy. At least mine were.
Yeah.
Got better at that while being at perception, because the films really taught me like just they won't take it. Like that was the other thing of like, you can't just give them goofy unnamed weird things, which I mean a lot of the
Hmm.
producers and people above you really make sure don't happen. But yeah, being lead compositor, I was like always like sweating bullets going on the 5 different exports where you're like, I hope this works. I hope
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
naming is right, and all of the timestamps are right, and you're just like, I hope so, or else they're gonna kick it back and yell at us and slap our hand,
Yeah,
which is
I've definitely gotten used to that part of it, but I will say, at least from like a personal like working thing, I'm so messy. Like,
yeah,
as long as the end product is like little neat and organized for like whoever's getting that part,
right.
like I don't care.
Yeah, when I hand off,
Otherwise,
I try to clean up. But like if it's just
yeah,
me and I'm like constantly upping it daily, it gets pretty wonky where I'm like, this is the OG thing, and then I baked it, and then I did this thing to it, and then this is actually the one I'm using, and then you just remember. And then when you
yeah,
open it like 2 weeks later, you're like,
because
which one?
you got to work with the flow when you're like creating
Right.
it, right?
Yeah.
Like I just can't.
Be
I
bothered to
will
rename.
never
Yeah.
sacrifice time for the sake of organizing, even though it'll
Yeah.
bite me in the ass later.
Yeah.
Because I just gotta like, you just gotta feel it when you're making it.
All the
So,
hashes actually really save my life a lot of the time of like generating
mm,
folders that are named after the file. Like that's the only breadcrumb trail I have
mhm.
to like find stuff again is it's like hard baked into the file that someone has when it unlinks, which it will at some point in the pipeline. You're like, oh yeah, it's back here. And then like
Yeah.
once I've learned that, I'm like, I can somewhat keep this at least so I can, when people are asking me for stuff, know that it's not like the typical like test O1 save final VO2 my name at the end. You're like you have a structure of a path, which
Hmm.
is nice to have, but yeah, it's yeah, you just really got to go fast pretty much a
Oh
lot of the
yeah, because
times.
there's like always that. I'm sure you've seen it out there. It's like that triangle of like fast, cheap, and whatever.
Yeah.
I think when we're creating, it's like it's fast, good, and organized.
Yeah, and organize is the first to go because it's like
Yeah.
eh, if it's a lockbox that no one knows, no one knows what's like
Hmm.
behind the wires of like a clean presented like I think it's like The Simpsons where he like clips his back and he like
Hmm.
looks clean and the back is like awful. It's like who cares? Like no one's opening like the project file on the client side. Like as long as they get a
Yeah.
video at the end of the day when they were supposed to, nobody cares that like you were doing goofy
Hmm.
stuff and like all the stuff is like essentially not really where it should be or like composited or weirdly
Yep.
um yeah,
I think that was definitely like a bit of a learning experience too, though, right? It's like
definitely.
it's all part of like the learning to prioritize what's
Yeah, time
what's important
management
for that
is like the
shot.
biggest thing. I mean, I did storyboards for something and I was like I need to stop at 15 minutes or else it just won't be
Hmm.
done, and you're just like okay, like they need it by this time. I have to manage my time with like a timer to like stop and move on, or like hopefully I can go back at the end if anything's like messed up. But like it gets to that point where you're like it's upwards of like 20 shots and it's like the time is against you. You have to move on, or else you're
Hmm.
gonna be like the person that shows up with like one frame versus like a good frame that's one doesn't beat 15 okay frames from somebody else. Like you have to just know that you'll go back to it at some point, but you can't do it now. Like you cannot perfect. I think
Hmm.
perfection, yeah, just chasing perfection is kind of always like what you think is the good idea. Or like eventually you'll do that consistently, but it's like, nope, you'll just be really good at making okay things and coming back and making them good and then coming back and making them great. Like that is the refining
Hmm.
process. Kind of sculpting like base, mid, or drawing base and then mid and then details. Like that's how almost all art is. Like ours is weird that you can kind of just push it really far with like one frame and you're like, oh no, I spent all my time on one.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
not
for
good.
sure.
But yeah, um, and now you're art director. What is that kind of process? You were doing generalist stuff like you were saying, and then like
Hmm.
is art director is just generalist plus a little more say. It kind of seems like a lot of times like art directors are still generalists. Like they still have to know how to touch everything when they have to push it or like pick it up or stop being a thinker and start like being on the box doing stuff, right?
Yeah. At least for me right now, yeah, it's I'm still very much hands on everything. Um, I suppose it just kind of gives me a bit of technical authority
Yeah,
to be
just
like, hey, do it this way or do it that way. I think it'll work better for the project, kind of thing.
right.
Um, the other part of it, I guess, is also just kind of being more client facing.
Yeah,
Um,
being in the room with like not hearing the distilled version from people of the notes and just being there to hear them probably.
yeah, it's that, but also presenting and also
Oh,
yeah,
talking
just
through
like
ideas.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah, talking through the ideas, negotiating your kind of standpoint on it,
Yeah.
trying to save as much as you can, kind of thing. At least I suppose that's part of an art
You get to
director
be one
role.
of the cooks versus someone just handing off ingredients in the kitchen kind
Yeah,
of idea.
exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of like answering questions from the client as well. Um, at least from for my current role, that's how it's been.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, mostly I'm still mostly like kind of just designer, but client facing designer.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's no
And
reason to drop that other stuff that you were essentially doing. Like, it's not, I think, in like firms, you can somewhat like everyone shifts and it's like now the other person's doing your job and you're doing like this next job. It's like, nope, it's just a fun hat that maybe gives you some seniority and you're still doing everything else you were supposed to do because why would they now hire another person?
mhm.
At least in a lot of cases with a lot of studios.
Yeah, I think probably the thing that's been the most challenging for me is just like figuring out how to delegate things to
Mm,
other artists.
yeah,
Um, and like I guess how to guide said like people that you delegate things to like do it the way that you think would be best, I guess.
yeah,
Because it's a very for me it's pretty fine line where it's just like I want to give my artists as much creative freedom as possible.
right.
At the same time, I don't want them to spin their wheels unnecessarily.
Yeah, like you need to
um,
cut it off when it's like not at the right spot, but also like know
mhm,
when to cut it off, or just like slightly coax someone into a different direction that might be more what they need to be doing versus like no 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 not
mhm.
that and be like well okay if it's not this then like what do I do? It's like well you know think on it a little bit. Just
Yeah.
like
So,
hopefully have them think they came up or both of you came up with like the new direction versus just always feeling like you're I feel like that's the worst when you're like kind of just someone's like, no, I'm the art director. This is what to do, and you're like, I wish I had any say in what I'm doing right now, and like
mhm.
that's always where it becomes pretty difficult. But yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's only been like a year of doing this as an art director, so uh, obviously I've got plenty to kind of pick up and learn in terms of
yeah,
like how to uh, manage those nuances.
I do like perception. Really does keep everyone on the box. Like CD head CD Johnny when we're drowning, it's like breaking out my After Effects skills, jumping in here with the crew, and you're like, okay, cool, yeah, you can do these two, and he's like, got it, I'll work on it late at night with you, and it's like awesome, because a lot of places like the CD's like, have a good one, walks out and like gets in their like fancy town car and like drives away, and you're just like, oh man, I wish you were here helping us and not just like giving good ideas and walking out.
Yeah, giving good ideas that completely shake up your like 3D setup, and you're just like, well,
Yeah,
I gotta rebuild
and just the knowledge base
that.
to be like in the meeting go no we're not doing that, that's gonna destroy these people, whereas like sometimes they don't know, like I've like ad
Hmm.
agencies like the CD just doesn't know and he's the final say and he's like nah we're changing it and you're like this is days of work gone, like you don't understand
Mm.
how much of a change that is, and then other changes they're like you got a couple weeks and you're like this is an hour's worth of work like why are the balances so confusing when
Yeah, I
like
mean, it stems to just not knowing, right?
mm-hmm,
It really does. I mean, that's kind of why I've like, I assume a lot of people do this too. Is just like, you know, everyone tries to like learn as much as they can outside of work of like,
right.
how things, or just like learning new techniques or whatever. And, there's just like so much to pick up, and like that all kind of feeds into like your just overall awareness of how to navigate problems, but also like kind of seeing a couple steps ahead of like what that might mean for like compositing or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Um, just
Helping
kind of having
producers
that.
like know who to bring on. Like I think that's a big deal of like
Hmm.
just being a generalist, you kind of know like we're going to be pretty light on this. We need someone to hop in and like crank this out in like a week as the specialist versus us spinning our wheels R&Ding it for like 2 weeks. Like you just need to know when to call it quits and like bring in the big guns and then like let the big guns go and like pick up after that. Like just get over a little hump, kind of like
Hmm.
forecasting that for a project is like a big deal.
Yeah, I don't think I've run into much of that yet,
Mm,
but
yeah, that was us on a couple ones where I think I came on as the third VFX Houdini person in like the span of a week. And I was like, and they're
damn.
like, don't worry, it's not bad. It was them. And I was like, okay, what
What
does
is that
that
here
mean?
at Perception or?
Yeah, it was I don't know if I can say, but it was one of the game ones.
Okay,
That was
oh, I wasn't aware
end
that
of
happened.
2020. Yeah. Well, it's nobody's fault. They were like big film guys and they're like, "Okay, I need like 2 weeks to set up all this stuff to run." They're like, "No. We need it like
Hmm.
tomorrow. Like we need something
Right, right,
today
right.
and tomorrow." And they're like, "Nah, I'm not going to do that." And they're like, "Okay, sorry. Like you are a
Gotcha.
specialist, but like so much a specialist that like it's hindering our workflow. Like you need to be a generalist, but like very well informed." And that's where I just hopped in with like, cool, this is the task. Gonna Google half the day and then execute the other half of the day and hope I can get something out at the end of the day.
Oh
It's like
man.
the way it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
So what I mean, everyone's kind of. I mean, it was mine for forever. Like my penultimate thing was like work on a movie title, and that was like done. I was like, what do else? What do I want to do? And I was
Hmm.
like, maybe take a break and take a vacation. That was
Yeah.
my thing, and take a lot of easy gigs. And then obviously jump back into it like later on because it is super fun and rewarding. But like, what is your like still bucket list like Mount Everest thing to do, seeing as like you've done what most people would kind of like see as the end of like a motion designer 3D person's like bucket
Yeah.
list.
Well, I think one thing was just kind of, I was involved in a couple of these title sequences, but I wanted to kind of be the designer on it, you
Mm,
know.
yeah,
I
not just
came close
pitch.
to that
Yeah,
on Falcon, but then we like had a
yeah,
little pivot. So I think that's part of it is just like not just doing the production part, but like actually
feeling
kind
like
of
your
coming
idea
up.
made it. Yeah,
Exactly. Yep. I think that's a huge thing for me.
right.
Luckily that's kind of happening right now, which is great.
Nice. Yeah.
Um, it's 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 tough, but we'll
Is there a
get there.
franchise you want to work on? Like, is there
I
like
don't
I
think
know
so,
like
to be
no, it's
honest.
just
I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think so. As long,
as long as
I
it's like a good idea and like you think
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
strong, and then it's like it doesn't matter where it's applied to, and sometimes more fun when you're like
Hmm.
not beholden to like you know a certain thing that people are expecting it to be, and you're just like,
Hmm.
oh, this is like open ended. Like this is not a franchise that like it's it's not the Star Wars scroll. Like that's gonna have to be at the front of it always. Like maybe it would be fun if it's like a franchise that
Yeah,
has less of
exactly.
that built into it.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is for me is like I don't feel attached too much to like any sort of franchise or IP kind of thing. Um, I guess it also kind of just stems from like I don't watch that many films to be honest.
It's funny. Yeah,
Like um, I
you're
just
not like
really
a
enjoy the
uber
craft of
Marvel
it.
head.
No, I
Like,
just enjoy the craft of it.
yeah,
And I like trying to like infuse that kind of more kind of like quote unquote poetic ideas into things. And that's really kind of what gets me going.
yeah.
Um, so like I suppose if it was like kind of bucket list kind of thing, it would be like more of like a series that's like an HBO show or something like
Mm,
that,
yeah,
where
but
it's
they
like
seem to
more
be
about
paring
like
down. Like a lot of
yeah.
theirs are like single type stays on screen for 15 seconds with
Hmm.
music, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it gets the job done, but like,
Yeah.
and
It's a
you
fine
could,
line because
yeah,
like that's the one tough part I feel like maybe I was talking to someone else the other day about it of I think maybe the hardest part about like working on Marvel sequences is that they're very long.
They are. They're like I think like normally about a minute and a half, 2 minutes long.
Yeah, somewhere in
It's
that time
yeah,
window. The current one I'm working on is like around minute 45 or
and
something like
steeped in
that.
like ideas, like not just throwaway
Yeah,
character
and
name. It's
it's
like no, this is like well thought out, very decided upon when it comes to like final frame. Lots of
hmm
people put their input in. The director had a lot to say of like the flow. Like there's a lot that goes like it's not just like that's a cool frame. It's like much more than that.
yeah, it's a lot of like Easter egg hunting and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, but like I feel like the challenge is because it's so long, like it's tough to get like the flow feeling good
right.
without it feeling dragged out.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank goodness for the legal that like requires things to be on, or I'd have no clue how long to like hold on stuff. Like
mhm.
there's like that's the thing I wasn't aware of is like you gotta keep certain names on, and people get very mad and bring their lawyers in if you don't, and will sue
Mhm.
like people for that spot and like where they come up and what follows like with or other things that come in front of their name are
Yep.
apparently really important based on how much money they put it. Like those things I just thought were like shake it up a bit, put a with in front of it. It's like nope, that person
No.
really needs that in
Uh-uh.
front of their name, and you're like oh okay. Or and I didn't know that was a
Yeah.
thing. I was like wow, huh,
Even type size.
yeah, type yeah that too. I
It's like
mean
it can't
also
be below X% of the
yeah
biggest type or something. It's just like, okay.
yeah
Yeah, sure we can make that happen, I guess.
yeah, just weird little things that you do not think uh would matter really do.
hmm
But same with automotive. That was my first time like, no,
Yeah.
this contrast has to be this way or it's not legal. And you're like, oh, okay. And it's like that changes your design. Or like work with inside this grid. Things have to be this big. You have to have all these on the screen at one time.
Yeah.
Go have a blast with that extremely limiting handcuff. And you're like, okay, how am I gonna make this cool after people have seen this for like the past what nearly 100 years of the
hmm
dial and the speed. And so
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
only so many ways you can fill up a bar radially or
yeah,
linearly.
yeah, which I think was like really a high achievement to all the UI UX people that like worked on that with us, because I mean I just got assets and shifted them around and scaled them up and colored them differently, but there was a lot of other I'm blanking uh the other staff member does a lot of it in India.
Oh, Sanu.
Sanu, insane amount of like talent there to constantly come up with like 20 ideas. Vlad as well, of
Yeah.
just like here's 30 icons for one item, and you're like I couldn't come up with two. Way to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
definitely not in my wheelhouse.
no, the couple times I had to do, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I can't. I'm not built for doing stuff in Illustrator. Like, I can. I mean, I work in it just fine, but it's like not to the level of those guys where it's like just hotkey city and like all sorts of things I don't even know Illustrator does. And I'm like, oh, I was making each one of those, and I didn't know you could pattern them and then clip them
hmm
and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, oh wow. Like I opened one of their files. I was like, I am a dumb person in this app. This is the pro user version of this.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, that's fun. I'm glad that we're working together for the next little bit. A reunion tour.
Yes,
Um,
little reunion tour.
because we haven't actually been, we've been in the same studio and have not been on anything since Falcon. Really, I think pitching on Falcon. I think we pitched on
Yeah, I think
journals too
so.
together.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
That was
Which
crazy.
have you seen those titles?
I did, and I was like, that's where I was like, huh,
Yeah,
weird. That's what came
weird.
out. Okay,
Yeah.
that is not. It also, because it's so lock and key at that point of like what information you get. Where I was like, if I had known any of the story or characters, I wouldn't have done any of my frames the way I did, and I felt very dumb for like that's what I came up with. Because after seeing it, I was like, holy crap, that's not what I thought this movie was. um, and so that was kind of exciting. Because you guys finished that one, right? That was still
No,
you
we
guys.
didn't do that one.
Oh, okay.
That's the crazy part about it.
Oh,
Is
hmm. There was, I guess, everyone has a lot of similar ideas. Would
yeah,
be
yeah.
the result of that. I mean, yeah, when you get a
It
log,
happens though,
yeah.
you
Same
know.
with another one that came out, which we did like a lot of fun exploration on, and I saw it. I was like, huh. I guess everyone had that idea. Would be
Hmm.
the thing to say there. um, uh, but yeah, it's also very lock and key. That's the other hard part of like I think I also goofed on Black Widow, where I was like, "We worked on this like a week before it came out," and they're like, "Delete it." And I was like, "Okay, sorry,
Oof.
whoopsies." But once
Yeah.
it's out, it's really fun just to be like, "Hey, look at it." It's a. The other cool thing was like ILM showing like a reel, and it's like some of the stuff was
Ooh,
in there, and I was like, "That feels fun." That
I
like,
didn't see that. That's cool.
yeah, they did all the breakdown of Black Widow. It's somewhere on my Twitter, and it's just like fun to be involved or handing stuff off to them. That's the
Hmm.
other cool part where you're like, I toured ILM back when I was in San Francisco. A very nice man on LinkedIn who was a generalist there was like, "Sure, want to have a tour?" I was like, "Absolutely." Um, and seeing the way they have like full dedicated theater rooms really kind of ups the ante of like they are watching this movie where they should be, and when they say this
Hmm.
pixel is too bright, you're like, yeah, okay, I trust you. I'm watching it on my screen in like my like in this studio, well lit without any like letterboxing. You're like, yeah, yeah, I guess you're right. You're watching it on the literal, real big screen. And when the director has notes of like, no, this isn't working, you're like, yeah, you're in an environment that is conducive to that. I trust your judgment here. Um, and all the sound stuff like that's a big part like which I didn't know was in tandem like that's happening like and changing and your edits changing to the music in tandem and like the beats you're hitting are switching like all the time until it like hits or like how I mean because it's all digital now like how close it gets to like the DVD being made when you're still working on it
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
"Oh my god, like it's
yeah.
next week. I sure
It's
hope
crazy.
we finish it." And then there's like the leeway period between that and like theatrical release, but like I didn't know that. I was like, "What is the deadline?" They're like, "Well, they have to put it on a DVD and produce it." I was like, that makes sense. That's a pretty hard deadline. Can't really shift that very much, even though you already have blown through like 6 deadlines before
Yeah,
then, just trucking along. Safety deadlines, I think. That's what
yeah,
they are. Producers knowing that we're just
buffers.
gonna bulldoze through them, just keep on trucking. But yeah, this was really fun. This was, I think, like pretty much just an extensive version of like our first times getting coffee at Perception and just being like, "What are you doing? Where are you from? Oh, where
Yeah.
are you from?" Like, I mean, you're in Queens now, but like, you have always been in New York or no?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay,
Uh, went to school down in Miami and then came back here.
yeah, so pretty much
Yeah,
the same.
so always been kind of in this
Yeah,
area.
okay, that makes more sense. I was
Mhm.
Michigan, San Francisco, and then here. A little taste of everything. um, but yeah, this was really fun. I think we're pretty much at the end of it. Thank you everyone for
Yeah,
stopping
it went by
by.
fast.
I know it's actually I prefer that versus I tried doing it at like 2 hours and you just kind of like
You were
unless they
stewing,
have
huh?
stuff to talk about, it's just like for these it's easier. The art stream's probably going to go a lot longer because you got 3 people talking about stuff and like screen sharing and looking over process. There's a lot to talk about when you're like looking at something, but when it's just like a get
Hmm.
to know you, it goes by pretty fast. But yeah,
Yeah.
this was fun. Thank you, Moyne, again for having the audio be fixed before I went too far into this. So apologies for YouTube viewers about the beginning. But yeah, that's it. Um, we'll be back around late February with Dave, and then in March, everybody will be back, and we'll so come back for that. I think anything you want to share? Any personal projects you're working on after that? Are you doing anything more,
Oh,
or just
not right
work?
now,
Work is
man.
enough. Yeah,
It's been a crazy 2021 and now 2022.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it was a lot of just working hard and then getting home and just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna play games or something.
What games have you been playing? I've recently finished the Halo Infinite campaign, which I thought was very good.
Hmm. So I was playing over the Christmas break. I had actually picked up The Witcher because we had
Okay,
watched season 2 of The Witcher.
that's Superman, right? He's in that. Henry Cavill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cavill. We like that series, me and my fiance.
Is it
Um,
close to Game of Thrones? It's like more magical Game of Thrones, right? Or not
I
as brutal?
I didn't watch Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay. How have you not watched that?
That's
It's
what
like
I'm
one of
saying.
the.
Is like I don't watch a lot of
I
like.
guess it's true. That's what I do to shut up we just binge burn through shows. We're on
Mhm.
the 10th season of Big Bang Theory currently. Just been trucking through that in 2022.
Nice.
Um,
We have two good friends that like they've decided during the pandemic that they were going to start watching Survivor just in the
a
background.
lot of people have done that. I've heard of a lot of people doing that.
Hmm.
I've not watched like more than a single weird episode like when it was on live TV. And I was like, I
Hmm.
guess I'll watch this. Um, but so Witcher, are you a PlayStation, or an Xbox person?
PlayStation, and then yeah, PC as well. We have a group of
Yeah,
friends that we were for a while, a couple months. We've kind of fallen off in the new year, but we were playing Escape from Tarkov,
I
which is
haven't
like
heard of
a
that.
it's like a super hardcore shooter. It's
Oh, like a CS:GO, sort of similar. Like,
kind of, but probably a little bit more on like the quote unquote realism side. It's like
mm, like
it's
Flashpoint
it's kind of
or
like
DayZ.
yeah, it's kind of psychotic.
Oh, okay.
The game design itself is kind of psychotic.
Like
It's
early PUBG, which was just
like
like
you
a
get like
cluster of awful UX experiences.
well, it's not even yeah, I mean it is partially that, but it's like you have to like track like that your player is like bleeding out or like
Oh, okay. Yeah,
things
so
like
very
that.
much
And there's
Flashpoint,
like
which was like a military training exercise video
yeah,
game
exactly. It's kind of
turned
like
into
that.
like a more common player. But yeah, you like, yeah, I mean, beyond like a hold your breath to have a better shot. It's like, hey, you have walked too far. You can't walk anymore. You're tired. You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
sit down and wait until I can go again.
There's thirst and hunger and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
It's just
and very
it's
very limited, I would assume, backpack where it's like, nah, too heavy, you can't go anymore. And you're like,
yeah.
what do I dump here that I will definitely need in like a little bit in the mile trek to another part of civilization?
Hmm.
It was Cold War, I think, the first Flashpoint, which was really fun because you were essentially just like dropped in Russia, walking around the woods. Like, I think it's like 2 pixels, per texture though. It's awful. It's so bad. But I remember it being so good when I
Yeah,
played it
that's the
at
funny
like
thing,
8.
right?
Yeah, your brain fills in and like
Uh-huh.
up reses everything, which I think I prefer now more. Like I'll down res like a game if it means that
Mm.
like it has less issues and like isn't all glitchy and weird. Because I mean, we all have master PCs now at home because of our job. Where I was just like, I don't need another console. Like I have the best console. Like I have an Xbox One from like 2013 that I've just never upgraded from, and it works just fine. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, yeah, me and Dave are Halo boys.
Oh,
So
nice.
he's always working on the ODST thing, which looks amazing.
Yes, yes,
Which
he
I'm
is.
excited to see whenever that comes out. Um, his Alien
Hmm.
thing came out, right? So he actually has
Yeah,
a pretty good
yeah.
track
He's
record
been
of like
cranking them
finishing.
out,
Yeah,
man. He's impressive because
I
like
don't know how he
I
has the
can't
stamina.
finish. I
Yeah,
can't finish shit.
I have
Literally,
streams where
the
I've started things and like I just like let them die, and I'm never picking it up. I still have a Star Wars short that I've been working on. Was supposed to come out before the show 2 years ago when they announced Obi-Wan. Not gonna hit it. I'm maybe
yeah.
gonna hit it on May 4th. That's the goal now, but I'm just like
Hmm.
probably not. Probably not gonna hit it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Literally the short that we worked on, Dave and Vlad, like I feel like that's the only personal project that or like short film project that
I
I've tried
mean,
to like do and actually completed.
for a lot of
Um,
time they supplemented not having work for your reel. Like that was why I did them. Like I didn't have
yeah.
clients. I was in college, and it was like I want to show something to get an internship. So I guess I'll just make up stuff, and then it's slowly
Hmm.
you start to replace it with like real big actual things you've done, and then it's like I don't need to work after work. Why would I do that to myself? My brain is depleted so much. I just don't want to be in this room anymore. I don't want to go sit on the couch.
Yeah.
Um, So hats off to people like Dave who can
Yeah.
do it all and have unlimited, I guess, stamina and willpower is the real thing. I don't have enough of
Yeah.
that to like. I'm just like, once I get a good frame, it pretty much is the death of the project. Where I'm like, that's all I wanted, really.
That's it.
It was all.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Just needed one shot. It's
Hmm.
fine.
Or you
Yeah.
finish out, or you figure one thing out, and you're like, I mean, do I need to trudge through the whole pipeline? Not really, because that's what I find more rewarding. It's like bumping out of plateaus where it's like, man, I think I like have a good workflow, but then you're immediately like, this is boring. I don't like to do this anymore. And then you're like, I gotta learn
Yeah.
something else to like get me out of like a rut is what I do. And Houdini's like a perfect rabbit hole to constantly be like, oh, they updated everything on how everything works. Okay, I'll go back and learn it all. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
but I'm super excited about all that stuff and bringing and studios to bring that in, like the USD and all of the stuff that like essentially brings us towards like a unified, never alambicing anything to anybody else, never versioning, all automated time, which I think is like years out. But yeah, well, this was
Hmm.
great. I'll let you get back to the rest of your Sunday. Thanks everyone for stopping by,
Yeah,
and I'll
thank
see
you.
you next month.